Hey there, Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate. We are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. And on today's episode, we are continuing on with our discussion of the Outcast Gangs to being used in Necromunda Ashways. And in this video, we'll be focusing specifically on House Ulanti Outcast Nobles. So with the Book of the Outcast, of course, you can now make delegation gangs where you use the delegation of the various alliance systems to form the very core of your gang, and noble houses also fall under this. So in this video, we're going to show you guys exactly the strengths and weaknesses of using a House Ulanti gang. We're also going to be talking about the individual fighters in the form of the Ulanti Courtier, as well as the Mirror Mask, and talk about their strengths and weaknesses, as well as their equipment and skills. And then the last thing we'll do, of course, is give you a 1400 point roster that you can use to play a House Ulanti Outcast Noble Gang in the Ashways and Necromunda. So that being said, let's get this video on a roll. Alright, so let's talk about the strengths of playing a Delegation Outcast gang. So potentially it's one of the most powerful starting gangs that you can actually have in a campaign, and the reason why is because of the fighters that make up your delegations. Regardless if you're playing criminal, merchant, or noble house delegations, they usually all start off with excellent equipment and skills right from the start. In some cases they have some really good stats, and they have some very powerful special rules that can make them really advantageous and very competitive in an Ashways campaign. At the same time, you can also take advantage of weird disciplines now because the Book of the Outcast released those weird disciplines. You can even customize your fighters even further. And in addition to adding vehicles with heavier weapon options and different boons and weapon gears from those vehicles, could also give your delegation gang a huge advantage out in the Ashways of Necromunda. And these are some of the advantages and strengths of actually playing a delegation outcast gang. Alright, so perhaps the biggest weakness of actually playing a delegation gang that's an outcast gang is that you cannot take any alliances whatsoever. If you decide to use the delegation as the core of your gang, no alliances are available to you. So for example, if you're a merchant guild delegation gang, you can't take criminal alliances or noble house alliances, and vice versa for all the other ones as well. So that's one of the biggest weaknesses of playing a delegation gang. If you really like using alliances to help your gang out, this might not be the one for you. However though, like I said before in the strengths, it does give you a leg up in the actual beginning of a campaign because you have better fighters, better equipment, and better skills. Now, one of the weaknesses of this game, of course, is that if you decide to play WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get type of gangs, this can be quite pricey in my opinion. And the reason why is because, for example, if you were to play a Nauticon siphoning delegation, for example, as the core of your gang, and you want to buy the Forge World miniatures in order to fill that gang, those Forge World miniatures can be quite expensive. So because of that, I would suggest looking for cheaper alternatives or convert your own in most cases. A lot of these delegations have not been manufactured yet, so you could possibly do that, but that's just something you might want to take into account. Me, of course, I would never actually do that. I would just convert my own or find alternate ways to get cheaper miniatures, and that's the thing I would keep in mind when I would be playing a delegation gang. At the same time, these gangs are also very expensive to field in terms of credits. These delegations, like I said, have a lot of skills, a lot of weapons, better stats, and you're going to pay for those. For example, I think the cheapest of the delegations starts off at like 540 credits, I believe. So because of that, it's going to be very, very expensive for you to field these fighters, but that's the way it goes. And lastly, probably the biggest weakness of actually playing an outcast delegation gang is that you do have to be aware of the balanced bandwagon. A lot of balanced bandwagon types will scream overpowered or game breaking or unfair and so on and so forth. But of course, once again, just ignore those immaturity of those players, drink the salt of their tears, and just use that to power yourself in destroying your enemies. So these are some of the strengths and weaknesses involved in playing a delegation gang. Alright, so when it comes to delegation gangs, once again, you get to pick from merchant guilds, criminal syndicates, or noble houses, and use those delegations you get from those alliances to form the core of your gang. Leaders also get archetypes and affiliations depending on what delegation you choose. Also, champions also get archetypes as well, so that allows for a lot of customization for your different members of your delegations depending on the affiliations and the archetypes that you choose. Now, once again, remember, archetypes depend on what kind of primary and secondary skills your champions and your leaders receive, while affiliations usually determine what kind of weapons and equipment you can get from the starting list, if not from the trading post as well. At the same time, the nice thing about these delegations is that the members of those delegations gain experience and they can purchase weapons and equipment over time, just like any other gang. So that part is really, really cool. And once again, I have to make sure I stress this a lot. If you decide to take a delegation outcast gang, you cannot make any alliances whatsoever in the future. So just be aware when that actually happens and keep that in mind. So when it comes to the actual noble houses of Necromunda and your delegation gangs, you actually have 6 different delegations you can actually choose from to form the very core of your gang. And those delegations are the House Catalyst Carnival, that's your first option, the House Ulanti Court Advisors, House Grain Military Attaché, House Courtier Ministerium Delegation, House Ranlo Auditing Conclave, or the House Tai Omioto Coven. So all 6 of the noble houses are available for delegations to use for the core for your noble outcast gang, and pretty much it just kind of depends on what you want to use and the various things you want to play and how you want to create the aesthetic for your outcast noble gang. So that being said, now that we're done talking about the delegations you can choose from, let's go ahead and talk about the specific core of your gang for the house that you choose on the next slide. Alright, so let's talk about House Ulanti's Court Advisors, which is the delegation that they supply you for your outcast gang. Now, if you wish to use this delegation, you're talking about a core value of 460 credits in order to put this delegation as the core of your gang. Now, to be quite frank, the House Ulanti Court Advisors are a very deadly, combat-focused delegation to form the core of your gang. Because of that, you'll need to provide a lot more support in shooting to assist your close combat fighters. The Courtier, House Ulanti Courtier, as well as the Mirror Mask, they can do a lot of stuff by themselves. They have a lot of buffs to close combat, and they're extremely deadly, but they are kind of wanting in terms of stronger weapons as well as heavier firepower. Now, you got to remember the House Ulanti Court Advisors, both the Mirror Mask and the Courtier, were perfectly fine as allies because you had other gang members that they were allied to that could supply them with the weapons they needed to be successful. Now that they're the core of your gang, you need to actually spend some time in order to develop the other fighters, which are your outcasts, hive scum, as well as your champions. Now, when it comes to this gang list, of course, needle pistols, power swords, and displacer fields are all available for your outcast gang right at the starting list. So you already have some pretty powerful shooting options, which have the silent trait, as well as toxin. We also have power swords, which are always awesome, as well as displacer fields. Now, you might not be getting displacer fields yet at this point in the campaign, just because you're starting out, and they do cost a lot of points, but just be aware that that field armor is available for you to purchase for your gang as your campaign develops. At the same time, when it comes to the weapons, needle pistols are great against multi-wound targets and are also perfect for stealth missions. And the reason why is because they automatically come with the silent trait. It's because that you will not trigger any sentries during stealth missions. At the same time, needle pistols are really good against multi-wound targets because so long as you beat their toughness test, you automatically put the injury roll on them. You could actually potentially put some really super heavy and really resilient fighters completely out of action if you get a really good series of rolls. Now, unfortunately, you cannot take advantage of House Escher's Chem Alchemy. That was actually the individual game mechanic that was available for House Escher gangs, where they can make customized chemical loads for their toxin weapons, like their stiletto swords, stiletto knives, as well as needle weapons. You can't take advantage of that because while House Olante used to be a strong ally with House Escher, this is not the case because you're a complete outcast gang. So that part is kind of sad. However, though, you still can purchase Chem delivery darts from the black market, which you only can use various chems that are available in the black market in order to toast up your opponents. So that option is still available to you, so you can still do that if you really want to. So that's a nice thing about that. At the same time, power swords are always a good investment for your gang. They automatically give you +1 to your strength characteristics, so strength 3 fighters will be strength 4, and strength 4 will be strength 5. At the same time, you have a -2 armor piercing penalty given to your enemies whenever you use a power sword as well. They also come with parry, which is also nice to be a little bit more defensive. And not to mention, because it is also a power weapon, it's really good for close combat because your power weapons cannot be parried by anything but another powered weapon. So that part is really nice as well. So you won't have to worry about having to suffer any annoying parrying rolls while your parent will have to do the same thing. Now, Displacer. Displacer fields that are available for your gang, it's kind of a mixed bag, and then here's why. For a Displacer field, you do get a 4+ ward save, which cannot be modified by the strength of any attack, or armor penalties, armor piercing. So that's kind of nice. So the problem though is that even though it's a 4 ward save against that, if it's successful, what ends up happening is that your character is actually pushed into a random direction the same amount of inches as the strength of the attack. So for example, let's say you got hit by a strength 5 attack and you manage to get that save, it'll push you in a random direction 5 inches from where you actually got from your hit point of impact. Now, this used to be a significant problem in Underhive, and the reason why it was such a significant problem was because you had 3-dimensional battlefields for the most part and Sector Mechanicus battlefields. You also had a lot of hazards available in Zone Mortalis terrain, so because that, it was a kind of a huge problem during that time. Not so much in the Ash Waste so much, because the Ash Waste usually take place in huge expanses of open space, so it might not be as dangerous as it was in the Underhive. However, you do suffer the probability of actually being shot off your vehicles, so that's something you do have to worry about in case if the character rank Displacer field does get hit. So while that 4-up ward save is nice, there are some penalties involved with it, especially if you manage to get that armor save. Alright, so now that we're done talking about an overview over the delegation, let's talk about the individual fighters in the House Olante Court Advisors. So first of all, you get the Ulanti Courtier. This person costs you 235 credits, and they will also be the leader of your Outcast gang. So let's talk about their statistics real quick. So the Ulanti Courtier comes with a 5-inch movement allowance. They have 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, 2 wounds. They also have 3+ for initiative and 2 attacks. And for their mental stats, they have 6+ for leadership, 6+ for cool, 7+ for willpower, as well as 7+ for intelligence. So because they will be the leader of your Outcast gang, I do suggest that when you do choose an archetype for your Olante Courtier, that you go with the Survivor archetype. Now the reason why you want to go with the Survivor archetype, because it gives you access to both the combat and the ferocity skills, which are really going to help you out in your development of your gang leader. In my opinion, you would probably want to focus more on ferocity and leadership skills, and the reason why is because you already do have a lot of buffs already for your Courtier in terms of close combat. They actually have a lot of things going for them, not so much for leadership as well as ferocity. So things like Nerves of Steel, for example, could really help you out because your character is deadly close combat and your opponents are going to try to shoot at them as much as possible, or things like leadership skills so that way you can do larger group activations, that nature. Now I will say this, for the leadership skills, you might want to skip Overseer on this one, just because your Ulanti Courtier has these double actions in order to use Overseer, so that kind of renders that person unable to fight or to shoot, and Ulanti Courtiers are very good in combat, so I suggest you skip that leadership skill. And because House Ulanti Courtiers are so deadly in close combat, I say don't be afraid to send them into close combat. They have needle pistols, they have power swords, they have displacer fields, so send right directly into the fray. They're kitted out for killing at close range to close combat, so they can be extremely deadly. At the same time, because they have the mirror mask in their delegation, they also have some extra buffs from that, because if anything else fails, if your Courtier is in a bad situation, you can actually switch places with your mirror mask because of the special rule that's attached to that fighter. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in detail when we actually get to the mirror mask. Now when it comes to your skills, you do have the Duelist special rule. The Duelist special rule basically states that if your Courtier gets charged against by any enemies, you actually get to attack first before your opponent does. It's supposed to represent the fact that the Courtiers are used to fighting in duels in the noble house up in the upper parts of the spire. So fighting down the low down, dirty parts of the Ash Waste and the Underhive is nothing new to them, so they get to attack first. At the same time, you also get counterattack, which is really great because you get additional attacks for every attack that your opponent misses, which is great. You also have Step Aside, where all you gotta do is take an initiative test so you can skip being attacked. It is really, really awesome as well. And like I said, that Duelist ability, the ability to fight first, is always an amazing combination, especially when you combine with the stats, skills, and weapons that the Courtier actually comes with. Now let's go and talk about the Mirror Mask. The Mirror Mask is going to cost you 225 credits, and for their stats, they have a 5-inch movement allowance, a 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength and 3 toughness, 2 wounds. They have 3+ for initiative, 2 attacks. For the mental stats, they have 8+ leadership, 6+ cool, 8+ willpower, and 7+ intelligence. So the Mirror Mask will be taking up one of your champion slots in your gang as part of the delegation, which is not so bad because in an Outcast gang, you can take one champion for every 3 hive skill that you have. So that's not much of a big deal. Now, in my opinion, for the Mirror Mask, the Brawler archetype would actually be the best one to go with because you get the additional strength bonuses in close combat is what I highly recommend. Unfortunately, combat is not available to champions in an Outcast gang for a primary skill because of the way the archetypes are listed out. So Brawler is going to give you that ability to take the combat skills you already have and take it to the next step. For example, a perfect one would be Bull Charger in my opinion. Bull Charge actually gives you a knockback ability for your melee weapons as well as +1 strength. So that part's kind of nice. I mean, it is kind of basic, but having that knockback ability is great because you can knock people off of vehicles. Your character is probably going to be a strength 5 with their attacks, combined with their power sword and that +1 strength bonus, which means at that point you'll definitely be causing additional damage on top of that, which is also kind of nice too. And the Survivor archetype would probably be another good one you can choose from, and the reason why the Survivor archetype would also be good is because you do have access to those ferocity skills, and ferocity of course is always a good thing to have for a close combat fighter. For example, Berserker as well as Impetuous are perfect skills to use from the Survivor archetype. Berserker gives you an additional attack in close combat, while as Impetuous allows you to follow through 4 inches, so that way you can keep on engaging enemies in close combat. Now, just like the Courtier, you also have pretty much the same kind of equipment. You have Needle Pistol, Power Sword, as well as a Displacer field, so those are really good assets. However, the best part about the Mirror Mask is their special rule mini faces, and they come with a skill Nerves of Steel. Nerves of Steel is good because you can escape pinning so long as you make a successful cool test, which is always helpful for a close combat fighter like the Mirror Mask. But the mini faces ability is probably the blue chip skill that comes with this delegation. Pretty much what ends up happening is you can save your Courtier from any bad situation that they might be in by trading places. What ends up happening is you literally take your Courtier and your Mirror Mask and you move them to each other's different positions, so that way you switch positions, so that way they don't actually kill your Courtier. Now, your Mirror Mask, of course, will be put in that bad situation, but it's much better to have that than have your leader actually go through. And it's an extremely powerful buff to have, because you could do certain things like, do like hit and run types of attacks where your Courtier attacks and then vacates before they get counterattacked, and then your Mirror Mask can take the blow, or vice versa. It'd be actually kind of cool to see exactly how that works out. So now that we're done talking about the members of the House Ulanti delegation, let's go and talk about your Underhyped Champions as well as Hive Scum. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Underhive Outcast Champion real quick. For these gangs, these guys cost 60 credits apiece, and for their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballistic skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. So let's go on and talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Underhive Outcast Champions, they're very versatile, and the reason why is because their stats are pretty much mediocre. Now that's both a good and a bad thing. While it might be bad because they can't excel at any one given thing, whether it's shooting or close combat, it does allow them to be able to equip a large variety of weapons and fulfill any role that you need them to fulfill within your gang as well. Now, when it also comes to your guys' Underhive Outcast Champions, archetypes, of course, are very, very important. But the problem with these guys, though, is that their archetypes are very limited for their skills, in my opinion. For example, they have 5 different archetypes they can choose from, but they only have 1 primary skill, and each of those archetypes followed by 2 secondaries. So, for example, if you were to take the Brawler archetype, Brawn would be your primary with Ferocity and Leadership as your secondaries. If you were a Gunslinger archetype, Shooting would be your primary with Agility as well as Leadership as your secondaries. For a Survivor archetype, Ferocity would be your primary, followed by Combat and Leadership for your secondaries. For Mastermind, Cunning would be your primary, with Leadership and Savant as your secondaries. And of course, for Weird archetypes, your Psychic Disciplines would be your primary, followed by Cunning and Leadership as your secondaries. Unfortunately for the champion, there are no archetypes where combat is a primary, so that is kind of limiting on what you can do. So you won't be getting any skills really to increase your combat abilities, but better weapons and equipment choices could probably help out with that as well. Now, when it comes to their equipment and weapons, they can purchase pretty much anything they want to off the trading post, so long as it's within the rarity value of 8 on the trading post. So they are kind of limited in some of their choices, but the reason why that is the case is because you can take 1 champion for every 3 Hive Scum in your gang. So for example, if you have 6 Hive Scum in your gang, you can take 2 champions. If you got 9 Hive Scum, you can get 3 champions, and etc. So that's basically where the trade-off kind of comes in. And then finally, of course, we have our Underhive Outcast Hive Scum, which is your typical ganger and juvie level fighter for your gang. These guys cost 30 credits apiece. For their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. And for their skill access, when they become a specialist, their primary is Cunning, with Ferocity as their secondary. Now, Underhive Scum, Outcast Scum, they're very mediocre, okay? But because of that, they're also very cheap to field. And even though they have very mediocre stats, they count as both gangers and juvie level fighters for your gang, and because their stats are still so mediocre, they can fulfill many different roles in your gang. You can equip them as shooters, close combat, you can use them as support, you can use them as suicide bombers, especially now that you can also put them on waster dirt bikes. They make great pursuers on waster dirt bikes, for example. So there's a variety of things you can do with these guys to fulfill pretty much any role that you want to. And plus, if you decide to make it into a delegation gang, you can also take better weapons equipment from the delegation lists as well. So that's another cool thing about Outcast Hive Scum as well. Now, unfortunately, you cannot start your campaign with an Outcast specialist, so that part is kind of sad. Almost every single gang can have a specialist except for Outcast, so that part is kind of sad, but that's the kind of the trade-off. Yes, you can't get those specialists, but right at the start, but you have so many guys you can choose from, and plus your delegations get to fill those roles anyways, so it's not that big of an issue. So that makes up your guys' Outcast Hive Scum. Alright, so now we're going to talk about what I like to call the Kings of the Road House Ulanti gang, Outcast gang. It's going to cost you 1,400 credits in order to field this group, so let's talk about what it consists of. First of all, you're going to have a House Ulanti Courtier. They're going to cost you 250 credits. They're going to get the Survivor Archetype as well as purchasing Mesh Armor for them to give them that additional save for 5 up. You're going to get them a Needle Pistol, Power Sword, a Displacer Field. They come with the Duelist, Counterattack, and Step Aside skills, and you need to give the House Ulanti Courtier the Nerves of Steel skill, so that way they can escape pinning. The Mirror Mask is going to cost you 240 credits and is one of your champions. They come with the Survivor Archetype. You're purchasing Mesh Armor for them for additional 15 credits, so they got a 5 up armor save. You're going to give them Needle Pistol, Power Sword, Displacer Field, as well as a mini Faces Special Rule, Nerves of Steel skill, and you're also giving Berserker to give them that additional attack in close combat. After that, you're going to have your first Outcast Champion. This fighter's going to cost you 185 credits. They got the Gunslinger Archetype. They're equipped with Mesh Armor, a Plasma Gun, as well as a Last Pistol, and they're taking the Fast Shot ability, so they can fire that Plasma Gun multiple times. And then you have 2 Outcast Scum, Scum number 1 and 2. They're both going to cost you 100 credits apiece. They're both equipped exactly the same with Mesh Armor, Needle Pistols, as well as Chain Swords. Needle Pistols for that additional ranged attack, and Chain Swords because obvious reasons. Now you also have your 2 more Outcasts beyond that, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4. They're both equipped exactly the same at 60 credits apiece. Both of them will have Mesh Armor as well as Last Guns. And then finally, you're also going to have a Scum Racer. It's going to cost you 405 credits, so you will be taking 5 credits away from your gang. But that's okay though, because you're purchasing for this character a Right Grinder, and it's going to have twin-linked autocannons for the ultimate ponage for heavy weapons. It's going to have smoke vents for -1 hit against, nitro burners to give it +1 movement, tire claws for +1 to handling, and easy turnover engine, so in case your engine stalls out. Now this is going to be a highly aggressive list that requires a lot of close quarters battle to destroy your enemies, and it consists of 2 fire teams. You have 1 assault fire team and 1 support fire team. Your support fire team will consist of your Outcast Champion, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4, as well as your Scum Racer. The Outcast Champion provides long-range shooting with the Plasma Gun, firing 2 rapid-fire shots at Strength 5, -1 AP, and 2 damage with the Fast Shot skill. Meanwhile, Outcast Scum number 3 and 4 use their Last Guns for long-range shooting, and you'll need to upgrade these with telescopic sights and hotshot power packs as the campaign develops. Now, because the roster is so small with a lack of shooting weapons, the list requires the use of a slower vehicle in the form of the Rock Grinder. The Rock Grinder is not very fast, but it's the only vehicle that starts off with the access to twin-linked autocannons, which are going to be really, really helpful. Having those autocannons with rapid fire, strength 7, I think causing 2 damage apiece is going to just tear your opponent's vehicles to pieces. And that's the reason why you want to have that slower vehicle. Now, to mitigate the slower movement characteristic, we are upgrading the movement to movement 6 by purchasing Nitro Burners. We're also giving it a 7+ in handling due to the tire claws, and at the same time we're also having -1 hit against you because of the smoke vents for additional protection. Now your first purchase after you complete your very first scenario, if you manage to generate credits that is to purchase a boarding ramp for your Rock Grinder truck, so that way your fighters have an easier time boarding enemy vehicles. Now for your assault fire team, it's going to consist of your Courtier as well as your Mirror Mask as well as Outcast Scum number 1 and Outcast Scum number 2. Now I made the Courtier and the Mirror Mask a little bit more survivable by purchasing Mesh Armor, so that way they have a 5-up armor save and a 4-up ward save, and that's going to be a very powerful combination. These two, their job is to board enemy vehicles or fight dismounted and get them in close combat to destroy your foes as quickly as possible. With those power swords as well as those needle pistols, they'll make short work of anybody that they come across. Same thing with Outcast Scum number 1 and 2. They're both equipped nearly the same as their Noble House counterparts. They do have needle pistols for stealth and toxin for range attacks, but I replaced their power swords with chain swords because chain swords are cheaper and they're pretty similar in their attacks characteristics. Chain swords provide a +1 to hit in close combat, which is great for these guys, meaning they're going to hit on a 3+. It also provides 1 armor piercing, so that's going to be nice as well. And they have parry as well as rending, so while they may not be as effective as power swords, they only do cost half the cost. Now, of course, as the campaign develops, you can get more fighters and faster vehicles, but for now, this is a good base to start from to create your, what I like to call, the Kings of the Road House Olante Outcast gang. So in conclusion, playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Outcast Gang is some of the great ways to add a lot of variety and diversity within a Necromunda campaign. That was actually one of the cool things that came out with the Book of the Outlands, that you got to see so many new gangs to be able to field into campaigns and keep things fresh, keep things interesting, and show a lot of cool different options you can actually do to make the world of Necromunda really, really awesome. At the same time, by playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Gang, you do have a lot of powerful options, and when you throw in vehicles and the equipment and weapons that it can take, you could even make your gang even more powerful as the campaign goes on. So in my opinion, pick your favorite guild, get yourself your very vehicles, whatever flavor you want to, head out to the Ashways and start to tame them for the name of your Merchant Guild and the name of Pride and Profit. Now, of course, as always, just watch out for the saltiness of the Balance Bandwagon. They're going to have a huge field day with this, screaming out grieving and overpowered and game-breaking mechanics and all that kind of stuff. But just remember, when you defeat them and they start crying about it, to enjoy those tears and use it to warm your soul. So that's good for those of you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out and stay classy.